and I want to get my panel's view about the biggest story probably of the week, which was the Telstra moves by the federal government, the plan to split Telstra into two, to force it if it doesn't want to do it voluntarily, but it's going to happen. Rudy, was this the new Communications Minister, Stephen Conroy, well, not so new, calling Telstra's bluff?
No, I think this is... I have a strong suspicion this was the plan all along. That they wanted... I mean, you have this position in Australia where you have an ex-government company which has so much control.
So almost monopoly.
They obviously want to break that, and you cannot reduce that market power without splitting the wholesale from the retail. Okay. And obviously, I mean, it has happened in the past in countries elsewhere. I would say, in general, I think Telstra is, under any scenario that now lies on the table, much better off than Telecom New Zealand just across the ditch, because they probably have to face a similar government initiative without participation. And I think the government here has at least given Telstra the opportunity, like, you can participate. I think that everyone's going to benefit from that.
Okay, but if you're saying it was actually the plan all along,
yes,
why didn't Telstra get that and understand that and grasp it and perhaps do it off its own accord?
Well, we have to... I mean, and also just have a look at the previous management and board at Telstra. I think there's a whole legacy there. They have recently made a shift, only recently. And in the end of the day, it is a game. And they now still have to negotiate the whole process. This is just throwing your cards on the table, and this is the game. I think one of the positives, where I totally agree with the general views about stockbrokers as well, is that Telstra has a lot of power in this. I mean, they really are going to be sitting around the table and negotiate, because they still have this whole assets.
Just tell me again, what power do they have when they're losing their copper network?
Well,
or they're losing the customers?
They're not losing it for 8 years.
Exactly. No, the power is in the fact that they obviously realise that the government wants to have it on their end to put in the new project. They can negotiate what price they will get for it, for instance, and what's...
But not when they're being legislated against.
Well, we still have to see how that pans out. I think
there's no legislation, or at least there's no oversight if they're going to structurally separate, which is the, I guess, the preferred option as opposed to functional.
But the government has essentially said, do it or we'll do it for you.
Yeah, but for a start, it's the doing of it that is very opaque. I mean, how are they going to do it, and what boxes do they have to tick?
Exactly.
That's pretty much at their discretion, is it not?
So there will be a negotiation, because it's not really true. Because what the government actually said is basically, listen, if you're not cooperating, we're not giving you any licenses, exactly, so they're basically cutting off their growth. And if you do cooperate, you will get those licenses, and we'll just work out how we're going to... I mean, that's like the best of two worlds.
But isn't it going to end up being perhaps an equity play into the NBN? Because the government has virtually said they're not going to get bundles of cash for this.
Exactly. So there's a Telstra obvious negotiation.
All right, but it is still losing a huge chunk of Telstra's business. Yes,
absolutely. But you have to realise also that Telstra in itself represents about 90% of all the profits that are made in this country in telecommunication, which is obviously massive.
When you say it's losing a whole chunk of the business, wasn't it the fact that the ratings agency said this week, no, we can't definitively say that, so we're not going to move on our ratings on the stock until such time as we see how this plays out? I think that's perhaps...
It's true. Sorry, some of the analysts are saying they're going to lose a big chunk of their business one way or the other, and that is the copper network, the fixed line.
Well, the thing is, they've got that at least for the next 8-9 years, don't they?
Well, it has to move progressively. I think the government has to see some progressive moving, or they're going to force it before 8 years.
And also, don't underestimate the reason why the share price, apart from shareholder selling, but the reason why the share price hasn't done that much is, as I said, in New Zealand, they're facing a similar company as Telstra is facing the prospect that the government will go ahead with a similar project the government has here, and they'll just say, listen, you don't have to participate. We'll just do it. With the result that the Telecom New Zealand has to spend a lot of money to build a high-speed network. The government will do the same with the competition, and they will be competing against each other, which will mean that's a much worse position than Telstra would ever be in here.
All right, so just one small aspect that I'm still unclear about. If the copper network does go into the NBN, and does that have to be upgraded to be this very fast broadband cable? I mean, the copper is a copper network. It's not fat enough. That's my pathetic understanding.
The problem with anything, well, it depends. But obviously, we're obviously going through stages. The problem with anything between now and the most modern technology we ever come up with in the future is that we still have this last mile, which basically goes from the street to your house.
Yes.
And everything you build outside there, you still need that last. And that's the reason why Telstra doesn't operate like any other telecommunication, because any other telecommunication company, for instance, I'm having my internet with another company, and every time there's a problem, they have to call Telstra, and then Telstra technician goes to my street.
Got your line into the house with your phone line.
So any other telecommunication company that operates in this country still needs Telstra for that last little bit. What the government is now trying to achieve is that Telstra will be operating on the same level as all those other companies, and they will separate that, and Telstra will have to go to the Telstra B, which owns then that last mile, and then operate on the same basis.
Wow. What's wrong with that? If it increases competition, surely that's a good thing. The previous government wanted to do this for years and didn't have the...
Well, I think in general that Australians underestimate the impact of competition.
I just detected also this week there was predictable soul bashing going on. Alan Kohler rolling out with we should sue them for every penny that they've taken from the company, him and Mr. Burgess. When in fact, if you were saying it, well, as you were saying before, Scott, currently, as then as now, it's been the mantra's been protecting shareholder value. We've heard it from 30 this week. Sol was, you talk about opening competition up. Well, of course, ergo, shareholder value in Telstra would be eroded at that point. So you can understand Burgess and Trujillo standing firm, because they don't want to be able to, on their watch, say, well, shareholder value's been eroded.
Yeah, that's
care
right.
of competition.
But you could
Go ahead, Scott.
Every other field is open to competition as well. If you're looking, across the sector, it's the telecommunication sector here is monopolised by Telstra.
Well, that was why the government, at the end of the day, decided to do that under the Keating government. It was a public float,
and that was fine. And they should have implemented. Now, editorial said that this week. These were reforms which should have been implemented 20 years ago when they deregulated the telco industry.
The starting point was wrong in the first place. I totally agree.
Yeah, and why shoot them? Why shoot the incumbents as they were then for standing firm and trying to protect existing shareholder value?
In every point, the former management stood in the way. The former board. There was
Well, Qantas is doing the same. Let's face it. On its routes, on its trans-Pacific routes with Singapore Airlines, they've lobbied like crazy.
If you want to leave Australia, you can. There's a range of airlines.
No, not really. Not on some of those key routes. Singapore Airlines cannot get into this market still.
As of the last year, yes, they haven't got over the Pacific, have they? No. But there are a number of other players who are on that Pacific route now. But can I just... I mean, I know the point you're making, Carson, and it's probably a valid one.
That argument just doesn't hold.
So you think there's a double standard?
I think there is when it comes to monopoly providers. And NBN, because of its unique... it's never been built on a scale like this before, not even in New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand's kind of not comparing apples with apples, really, because it's a smaller entity. So too Britain. Yeah, this is a massive continent here.
Yeah, but it's the same principle where you have an ex-government near monopolist who's facing a threat. And in New Zealand, the current setup is like you're not participating at all. Yeah. And here the government goes, listen, you can participate if you want. Yes. Which will, in the longer term, you will see that's going to be a much better position.
Telstra treated the whole NBN process with contempt anyway. When the tender process...
They overplayed their cards, I think. Yeah, they thought the other party, the government, they would never pursue their threats that far. And now they're doing it, obviously.
Scott, what were we going to say?
Well, you're just saying the tender process was a contempt. Wasn't their tender 3 pages long for a $42 billion project like this? Like at every step in the way over the past 4 years, the board has acted, I think, not in the national best interest. Yes. So, look, I think it's a good move. The government should have done this. Helen Coonan couldn't do it, and Stephen Conroy, although he's been virtually not very active, has grown some backbone.
He's been really salted. He's been kind of bunkered away, working this out, and going to take them on.
This was, a stunning national policy, and this is a national issue, and I think it's, moving down the correct path.
Yeah. I think it's a very, very brave step to take.
Brave, crazy brave, brave, good brave.
Well, if it all, in the end, it will all come down to execution. But if it's well executed, I'm pretty sure that the telecommunication industry and the Australians themselves and Telstra shareholders over the longer term will all benefit from this.
Isn't this what we want in terms of policy? Brave policy? We haven't had much of that in the past.
As long as it's brave and well executed, I would agree, yes.
Yeah. Scott, would you say that as long as it's, it's good policy to have it run by the government and not run, in a sense, by corporations who want to protect, very fat margins?
Look, I think there's a case for, both of them to be running it. corporations provide the expertise and know-how, government provides the regulatory framework and, the political and the policy framework for it as well. So, look, I think there's a case for probably both, but, Telstra didn't want to play ball. The government's pressing ahead with a very vital piece of infrastructure.
All right. Scott, could you foresee an NBN without Telstra being part of it?
Look, I think it would be difficult, and I think it would be hard to achieve, but give it a crack. Why not?
Scott, don't you think now they are probably really going to be forced to be involved?
Look, they will, and that's part of the process as well, that Conroy wants to. They didn't play to start with, so Conroy's playing all of the cards which he has to, move them in. I think the fact that it seems that Telstra, even though it knew this was an option, I think was still caught by surprise this week. Apparently they were briefed on it only very shortly before it was announced. So
I think in general, I think everyone in the industry, including Telstra, thought, like, if they're going ahead without Telstra, that's going to be a hard call. It's possible, but it's going to be a hard call.
So they were trying to call the government's bluff.
Exactly.
Carson, what do you
I think
say?
Telstra could still call the government's bluff over the whole cost, which has been plucked out of thin air from absolutely nowhere.
The 42 billion.
Exactly. If there are cost overruns, Telstra is going to be able to claim loss of business, surely. I mean, it goes both ways.
I think the government has found a nice stick to hold behind it, and I think that's why I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be like negotiations around the table, and both parties will have. Well, no, you would hope not.
Okay.
All right, just one issue that obviously came up as part of this was talk very right off the mark that, the Future Fund selling down a third of its shareholding in Telstra 5 weeks ago, and Steve Fielding in the Senate coming out and saying, there could be an inquiry into this. Now, is it, what do you think?
I like it's Carson and I both know I like nothing more than a conspiracy theory, but I think this one went a little bit too far. The Future Fund is run independently. David Murray is a business person of such accolade and accord. I'm sure he wouldn't be going dumping millions of shares onto the markets when he knew something. If he knew whatever it was, I'm not buying this one. Steve Fielding's trying to deal himself into the national agenda once more.
But
doing very well.
What I was going to say, Carson, is that don't forget, and other commentators have pointed this out. The Future Fund sort of had Telstra foisted on it. It didn't choose to buy the Telstra shares. But as part of the terms of T3, it was constrained from selling Telstra until last November.
Well,
so, and we were in the grip of the financial crisis, so they didn't want to sell right at the bottom.
I was going to say those shares have underperformed in that time, and so, OK, look, in the last month or so we've been in haymaking territory.
Yeah, so perhaps why not sell? Do you believe that it was just coincidence? It really was coincidence?
I'm concerned, I guess, if anything, by what would then otherwise be the swing argument, which is a complete lack of dialogue between the Future Fund. After all, what is its mandate?
Well, that's right. It is there
No, go on. What is its mandate?
Well, its mandate is to be there to fund the liability of the superannuation of public service.
Now,
building value.
By
the
building
fact that
value.
those very customers that it purports to act on behalf of, i.e., that there would be no dialogue both ways, to me would be actually quite concerning. I would want to know there was dialogue.
You think the Department of Communications bureaucrats should be able to say, oh, well, look after the Future Fund because that's my money and here's a bit of information about what we're going to do with Telstra?
I don't think it has to be on the sly. I mean, I would have just thought that there would have been a healthy flow of this is policy at the moment and you act on it.
It's very strictly set. It's guidelines about how it can invest.
It's the Chinese walls and everything like that. Is the policy divide. It is a major shareholder.
Wipe the smile off your face.
I said a few weeks ago, I still maintain, I still think they were too late in selling it in the first place. Because, the share market has rallied since March.
But they were constrained, though, weren't they?
Too early or too late?
Too late. They should have sold in March.
Don't they have an idea? Don't they have
or in April or in May, but not now.
Can't they only sell certain amounts at a time and there's going to be a gap after that because they can't flood the market? I think David Murray said this week, actually, they're not going to sell any more for 6 months. Because the last thing they want to do is create the overhang in the market as well.
Yes, exactly.